My name is Kathy. I am now 23 years old and I live with my father. My mom died when I was very young and it was just the two of us. My dad has been everything to me, both supportive and encouraging. He did his best to fill the void left by my mom. We lived a quiet and peaceful life until one day everything changed. When I turned 18, I started college. It was the beginning of a new chapter in my life. For the first time, I left my home, where I felt protected under my father's wing, and entered a new world full of unknown opportunities and challenges. I remember how nervous I was before the first day of school. Everything around me seemed so unfamiliar and amazing. In college, I met a lot of different people, many of whom became my friends. We shared stories, discussed lectures and just enjoyed each other's company. But sometimes I missed home, especially when I thought of my dad sitting alone in the evening remembering my mom. I cried a lot when he called me, his husky, quiet voice just tore at my heart. Gradually I got used to the new rhythm of life. However, one event turned everything upside down. It happened a few months after I started school. Then I met a group of girls who were completely different. They knew how to have fun, went to parties, and flirted with guys. I looked at them with admiration and fear at the same time. I was drawn to this sense of freedom, but the promise I made to my father kept me from participating in these activities. We shared a dorm room. Every Friday, the girls would start getting ready for their next outing. Makeup, brightly colored dresses, all this created a festive atmosphere. I watched them, trying to stay in the shadows, but their energy attracted me. Gradually I began to join more often in their conversations, interested in what they were doing with their lives, but I didn't tell my father about it, he wouldn't understand me. One day one of my friends suggested going to a party with them. I hesitated, but curiosity got the best of me. I decided that nothing bad would happen if I just saw what it was like. In the evening we went to the club. The music was blaring, people were dancing, the atmosphere was energized. I stood aside, watching what was going on, but I felt that I was gradually sinking into this maelstrom of emotions. Every day, my father would call me, checking how I was doing, asking me what I was doing. These calls became an integral part of my life. Often I would sit on the threshold of my room, waiting for the phone to ring, to reassure him, to tell him that everything was all right. And nights I partied until I fell over, forgetting all the rules and promises I'd made to my father. One day at a party, I met a man. He was older, more confident than the guys I usually hung out with. I didn't even remember his name, but I remember him buying me drinks, complimenting me and admiring my beauty. I lost track of time, allowing myself to relax and enjoy the attention. At one point I felt lightheaded, and his insistent gaze began to frighten me. I tried to walk away, but my legs felt as if they were no longer obeying me. That's when my friends came to me, intercepting the situation just in time. I am grateful to them to this day. This weekend, I was going to go to my dad's house. Before the trip, I bought him a plaid shirt, the kind my mom used to buy him. He'd always loved those shirts, and I hoped it would remind him of the good old days. When I entered the house, my father was sitting on the couch watching TV. I decided to make a joke and quietly walked up behind him, intending to scare him. But before I could touch his shoulder, he turned around and grabbed my hand. "You're back," he exclaimed, hugging me tightly. Without warning. We both laughed, but I saw more than joy in his eyes. It was a mixture of relief and excitement. He let go of me, looked at me carefully, and asked, "How are you? Are you okay?" I nodded, smiled, and held out the gift bag to him. "Here, Dad, this is for you." He opened the bag and pulled out a shirt. His face lit up with joy, then darkened for a moment. He remembered his mom, her gentle hands picking out that fabric, her smile when she gave him shirts like this. Tears came to his eyes, but he quickly dealt with the emotion. "Thank you, Kathy," he whispered, pressing the shirt to his chest. "It's beautiful." The moment was filled with such warmth and love that I felt tears rolling down my cheeks. We hugged again, silently, just enjoying each other's presence. In that moment I realized how much this connection meant to me, how much I loved my father, and how important it was for me to maintain our closeness. In the evening, we sat in the kitchen, drinking tea and talking. My father would tell me what he was doing, how his day was going, and I would share my news from college. But an unasked question hung between us: how was I coping with the new acquaintances, the nightlife, the changes that were happening inside me? He was hesitant to ask directly, afraid of hearing an answer that might upset him. I, for my part, avoided the subject, not wanting to alarm him. When night fell, I went to bed in my old room, surrounded by my childhood toys and pictures. I lay awake for a long time, thinking about the path I had chosen. On the one hand, I felt the freedom and pleasure of new acquaintances and entertainment. On the other hand, I felt guilty in front of my father, who trusted me and hoped that I would follow his advice. I woke up early in the morning, before the sun had risen above the horizon. The house was quiet, and I went into the kitchen to make breakfast. Dad walked in after me, smiling and rubbing his eyes. Early in the morning, my father was already setting the table. He was wearing the same striped t-shirt he'd worn for years. I jokingly remarked, "Dad, when are you going to change that shirt? I think it's already become your second skin." He grinned, blushed slightly and replied, "Come on, Kathy, this shirt is good luck. I can't part with it." We laughed and I sat across from him. Breakfast had its usual warm atmosphere. While we ate, I scrutinized my father. I hadn't noticed before how handsome and young he was for his age. His thick hair, lightly touched with gray, made him look noble, and his muscular arms showed that he was still taking care of his health. His t-shirt, though old, emphasized his athletic build. It suddenly occurred to me that it was men like that, mature and confident, that attracted me. They are easy to get along with, they know how to make a woman happy and comfortable. After breakfast, my father went to the yard to do household chores. I stayed at the table, finishing my tea and thinking about my thoughts. Strange, why didn't I pay attention to my father's beauty before? Maybe it had to do with the fact that I was growing up and starting to see the world differently? Or maybe it was the influence of new acquaintances and the men I'd met at university. My gaze rested on the window, through which I could see the yard. My father was working on something near the barn, his figure standing out against the green grass. At that moment I felt how glad I was to be here, in my own home, near him. It seemed that everything bad was behind us, and now the most important thing was our communication, our connection. I got up from the table and went to the window. I couldn't see my father, he must have gone somewhere deeper into the yard. Suddenly I felt uneasy. What if I lost him? What if something happens and we can no longer just sit at the same table, laughing and sharing our thoughts? Those thoughts brought a lump to my throat. I tried to chase them away, but the anxiety wouldn't let go. Determined to distract myself, I went upstairs to my room. There, among the children's toys and photographs, I tried to find solace. I picked up an old photograph of my father and me together. He was holding me in his arms and I was laughing, looking directly into the lens. In that minute, I realized how much those simple moments of happiness meant to me. Later, when my father returned to the house, I went over to him and hugged him. He looked at me in surprise, but he didn't say anything. He just hugged me back, holding me tightly. In that hug, I felt all the love and care he had always put into me. I knew that despite all the difficulties and changes, our union would remain unbreakable. That evening when I returned to the living room, Jack was sitting there, his shirt clinging to his body, soaked with sweat. He was reading the newspaper, but his gaze was very blank. Our gazes met for a moment and I noticed his eyes redden and quickly looked away, as if looking directly at me was impossible. Awkwardness hung in the air, but I felt unexpectedly bold. Smiling, I walked past him, heading for the stairs. "Kathy, wait," Jack said suddenly, getting up from his seat. His voice was soft and unsure. "Let's talk." I stopped, turned around, and looked at him. There was concern and worry in his eyes. We stared at each other in silence, and in that moment I realized that he felt the same way I did. There was an invisible bond between us, based on years of mutual understanding and support. "I know this is hard for you," he continued, moving closer. "This year hasn't been easy for you. But I want you to know that I'm always here for you. I'll be there for you no matter what happens." His words warmed my soul. I walked over to him and hugged him. In that moment, all doubts and fears faded into the background. It was at that moment that I realized that I didn't want to let him go. I even thought that I should quit my studies to be with him forever. We stood like that for a long time, enjoying each other's warmth. Then he pulled away slightly and looked at me. "You know, Kathy," he said, smiling, "you've grown into such a beautiful and intelligent girl. I'm proud of you." Those words made me smile. For the first time in a long time, I felt like a real woman and not just a daughter. In that moment, we both realized that our relationship had moved to a new level. Now we were not just father and daughter, but two adults capable of understanding and supporting each other. Later, as we sat at dinner, the conversation moved smoothly to the future. Jack told me about his plans, how he wanted to expand the business and how he dreamed of seeing me successful and happy. I shared my dreams and goals and we discussed how we could help each other achieve what we wanted. But I didn't know how I could fully open up to him and confess everything I was feeling and seeing. I didn't know how to ignite his inner fire that would reveal all the cards and his feelings for me. As I approached Jack, I could feel my steps growing heavier with desire with each step. Sitting down next to him, I noticed how close we were. The distance between us was so small that his breath barely touched my cheek. "You saw everything just now," I whispered, smiling faintly as if it was just a simple observation. Jack's brown eyes lit up, his face becoming shy and awkward. He tried to gather his thoughts, but his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the front of his shirt. Our gazes met again, and I could see the battle between reason and emotion that was unfolding in his soul. "Don't avoid me," I said softly, keeping my eyes on him. The space between us felt heavy with tension. Jack swallowed, his dry lips moving, trying to say something, but the words wouldn't come. "It doesn't work that way," he finally said, more to himself than to me, but I didn't let him finish. A strange, strong feeling came over me. My hands reached up and found his shoulders. I pulled him closer, playing a silent dance with him until our lips touched in a light kiss. He tensed with surprise at first, but after a moment his lips softened, responding to my impulse. Jack didn't hesitate anymore. He wrapped his arms around me, and we rushed toward each other without hesitation, as if the outside world had ceased to exist. I was so afraid of it, but so happy that it was with him. The house became our personal refuge, where all fears and doubts disappeared whenever we were near each other. Every time I entered the house, I could see his eyes light up with anticipation of meeting us. The fear of being discovered still crept into my thoughts, but gradually all barriers were erased and Jack wouldn't hurt me. Our meetings became a time when we were immersed in an inseparable bond where emotions overwhelmed us. Jack had a knack for making me forget everything, bringing me to heights of pleasure I had never experienced before. The house, once a peaceful place, became the scene of our most passionate moments. My heart beat faster when I heard his footsteps, and every feeling in me awoke anew. Every morning, our eyes met and in them I saw a reflection of my soul. I realized that I was deeply in love, and I couldn't go back to my old life. We continued to live like that, clinging tightly to each other, sharing every moment until time stopped, leaving only the two of us to share our secrets. I knew one thing: I wasn't going back to college. My home and life was here with him.